noch nach vorne. Ben soll sich nach vorne setzen. Welcome everyone here in the room and to those who join us online. We're very happy to host the open conversation of Circle U from recognition to inclusion, rethinking European languages. Circle U is an alliance of 9 European universities. I'm very excited about this. I only joined this April and still learning about it. It's a network of universities to foster collaboration, innovation, and knowledge exchange. In Circle U, I am part of CU Mill. I'm one of the millers. And we millers concentrate on multilingualism, interculturality, and language. Our main goal is to empower students and staff meaning academics as well as the other staff to thrive in diverse cultural environments with a focus on multilingualism. So that's the background in which this is embedded today. We're doing this today on the occasion of the European Day of Languages, which is organized by the Council of Europe and the European Commission and celebrated every year starting in 2001. It always celebrated on this day of the 26th of December. The objectives of this day are to celebrate linguistic diversity, also promote language learning, and diversifying the range of languages learned, increase plurilingualism and intercultural understanding. Whenever I see this, I'm thinking of, okay, but what do we mean by European languages? Isn't the focus, especially of the EU, is often just on majority languages. So in my perspective, a European language is, for instance, Kurdish, because it's spoken in Europe a lot. Is Arabic, is Russian. So today's central questions from this perspective are, what are European languages? Which languages are actually spoken in Europe, and what does that mean? And this is our specific focus here for the school context, for education. And how can we move towards more inclusive and equitable practices? Apart from the audience, which I hope will join our discussion a lot, we have a dedicated panel consisting of the keynote speaker, Christoph Schröder, who's a professor of German as foreign and second language at Universität Potsdam. I'm supposed not to translate the university names. Don't ask me why. His foci, among others, are language contact in the context of migration and language policy. I'm only mentioning those research foci that are relevant for us here today. So if you think, well, I'm doing much more, that's why. Will be followed by a commentary by Elisabeth Beloe, who's the head of the German Federal Association of Networks of Migrant Organizations. She has a background in sociology and works, among others, on migration and education. The other panelists from different Circle U universities are Simon Kalmar-Andersen, who's professor in the departments of political science and of economics and business economics at Universität Aarhus, and working, among others, on education policy, which will be very interesting for us, and public administration. So he brings an interdisciplinary perspective in here. And Fanny Meunier, who is joining online, because she is organizing another major event today, a Miller event. She is the academic director of the CU Mill, and professor of English language, linguistics, and teacher education at UC Louvain, and works on second language acquisition and teacher education. Next is Mehmet Fatih Özcan. He's a multilingualism officer of the Berlin Senate Department for Education, Youth, and Family. So he brings the perspective of language policies in education in here, and works on multilingualism and education policy. Ben Rampton is Professor of Applied and Sociolinguistics at King's College London, with focus, among others, on urban multilingualism, ethnicity, and education. Finally, and this is in alphabetic ordering, is Eva Vetter, Professor of Language Teaching and Learning Research at the Universität Wien, working on multilingualism, language learning, and education. In addition, there's our group at Humboldt-Universität zu Berlin, sorry. Again in alphabetical order, but actually this is not just alphabetical. Irem Duman-Chakir is the kind of the main coordinator of this event together with Annika Labrens. Irem is a PhD student in my group and working in the research unit Emerging Grammars and Language Contact Situations. Her research interests include multilingual and multi-ethnic urban settings and the constructions of identity and belonging. Josephine Humboldt, is one of our MA students interested in linguistic ideologies and multilingualism. Marius Keller is another MA student, particularly with a focus on multilingualism in education. Annika Labrens, as mentioned, is the other organizer, also a PhD student in my group and working in the collaborative research center Register with focus on language contact, language policies, and ideologies. And finally, myself, I'm a professor of German in multilingual contexts. And I now hand over to Annika.
Yeah, a very warm welcome to everyone here at Humboldt-Universität and also on Zoom. I will just quickly guide you through today's program. So we will start with a keynote talk by Christoph Schröder, which will be followed by a panel discussion with our panelists before we then open the discussion to the audience. After that, we will have a presentation or a commentary by Elisabeth Bilot, and then we again open for discussion. And then we will go into a 90 minutes lunch break. So this session will be streamed at the HU YouTube channel live, and will be recorded also for later purposes. Will be online. We will have a panelist on Zoom and here on site mainly. The second part in the afternoon will be on-site participation only, but we will still record this part so it can be seen later at the YouTube, HU YouTube channel also. So in the afternoon we start with the first roundtable on educational policy, chaired by Simon Kalmar Andersen and Mehmet Fatih Özcan. And the second roundtable on school, culture and belonging will be chaired by Ben Rampton and Eva Vetter, and both will be then followed by panel inputs and then open to discussion. So, and finally, Heike, Irem, and me, we will open or summarize what we heard like in the day, and we'll have an open discussion towards solutions. So there we invite everybody to reflect on how we can go forward. And I hand over to Irem.
Thank you. Before we start, I'd like to give some practical information for on-site participants first. We will have a lunch break at noon. Nearby restaurant tips can be found in the flyers you have there. We will have 2 breaks in the afternoon, and open buffet will be available at the back of the auditorium. And we will have an open lounge at the end of the program for informal exchange. So toilets are downstairs in the locker area, and you can find also a gender-neutral toilet on the 7th floor. And I'd like to remind our online participants to please keep your microphones muted when not speaking. And I'd like to repeat, please note that all sessions will be recorded, and the morning sessions will also be live streamed on the YouTube channel of Humboldt-Universität. So if you don't consent to being recorded or shown on camera, please keep your webcam turned off throughout the event. Thank you. So it's my pleasure to give the floor to Christoph Schröder.
One note on the microphone use.
During the discussion, please wait for the microphone. I'd like to add for the on-site participants. So I'm giving the floor to Christoph Schröder for the keynote speech. But I'd like to first open it here. So. This should be it. Yeah. Oops, sorry. But you can see it here. Yes, but I can't. Sorry. I can't open it here. Okay, sorry. Ist das nicht das? Genau. So, yes. Okay. Ah.
Nee?
Ach ja. Den freigeben. Und das, oder? Genau. Ja. Jetzt soll es gehen.
Super. Ja. It works. Thank you very much for the invitation. You can hear me when I talk like this. I got in the preparation for this talk, I got somehow carried away by the topic, which means that first, in terms of like the length of the talk, might be in danger, like more than 30 minutes. The other thing is that I kind of like got away a bit from the abstract, and I'm sorry for this. Let's start with an example. Now this is the outline. I start with an example, and I have two anecdotes to tell, and then I talk about social spaces of our Western societies. Western is the question mark, because I'm not sure, maybe like Heike's experiences from her latest trip to Australia and Southeast Asia will inform us more. I talk about hierarchy of language classes in the formal public space, that is school, and then I go into possible alternatives way to go in the shorter run and in the longer run. Now, let's start with an example. This example is well known to Irem Duman. It comes from her ethnographic work at the street market in Berlin, where you have, and street market is, and I introduced this, for me, informal public space, market, shops, business, and the like, where the customer and the seller negotiate the way some pita, some bread. What is it? They're burek. Yeah, they're talking about the burek, and the buyer wants the burek, and the seller sells the burek, and they switch languages. They use what they have in resources of languages, and in the end, they're of course successful in that. Now, two anecdotes. First, Cyprus University. About 20 years ago, I was at the University of Cyprus for for a term, one term, and it was the Republic of Cyprus, which had just before become part of the European Union. And as you know, Cyprus is separated. There's one northern part, which in the eyes of the southern part is occupied by Turkey. And the southern part is the republic, is the part which says we are the Republic of Cyprus. And the southern part continues to have two official languages, Turkish and Greek. And I was at the university. University also says our languages are Turkish and Greek because they have the claim that they are responsible for the whole island. Okay, so I had this talk with the president of the university before I started working. And he said, like, in which language are you planning to give your seminars? I was going to work at the Institute of Turkological Studies there, and I said, well, English, I suppose, because I don't know about the what the students know. And then he said, well, wouldn't you be able to sort of do it in Greek, or maybe work on, like, be able to do it? And I said, no, but I could, no problem, use the other official language, Turkish, in my seminars. And then all of a sudden his smile froze, and he said, no, English is okay. Another example, Potsdam University, very recent example. We had a nice, very intensive seminar on language policies in institutions, and there was one group that group of students presented a thing on university language policies, language politics, language policies, and also the representative of the international office was present at this seminar, and one of the students talked about this one seminar which she attended, which was run by I think she's an American scholar, and she kind of constantly switches between English and German in her talks. It's a kind of translinguistic seminar, and she was really, for her it was quite an experience, this seminar, and she liked it. But then the representative from the international office said, well, yes, they had problems with this particular professor because they didn't know how to list her seminars, whether they would be listed to the English seminars or the German seminars. So there was this problem. So like this translingual didactics or translingual mode of the seminar obviously was a problem for the institution. Which brings me to the social spaces of our Western societies. As I see it, we can speak, and this comes from Utz Maas has worked a lot with this kind of tripartite distinction, where he says there's the formal public space, the institutions of the society. Now here we're in the formal public space, the university, the library, school, administration. I go to the Amt Berlin, and I have a problem to clarify, and so on. There I'm in the institutions in the formal public space. The informal public space is where the example from the market comes from. Market, street business, and the private space is the space of families and peers. And when we look at the languages used and the languages which may be used, it's pretty clear in the institutions of society we have discrete languages. We say this is this language, that one. This language is allowed to this extent, this language can be used here and there, and if you want to, if you want to give your if your dissertation at the university is in English, then you have to add 10 pages of an abstract in German, Katharina, and the like, okay? Not any language can be used. It is based on, and this is the important thing, based on implicit or explicit contract. Now, in the market, the languages are used, the multitude of languages and varieties and codes, and the term codes is not important, will kind of pop up later again, is based on, I would say, negotiation. because this market example very, very easily shows like it's negotiated, like what resources to be used in order to arrive at the successful communication. And when we look at families and peers, I would say it's personal relation. I mean, me and close friends, we have certain languages we can share, and these languages are part of our relationship. They're part of our privacy. And when we switch the languages, it has a personal meaning, okay? It's not just like playing around. It's not just like information in another language, the same information in another language or what. There's other meanings sort of being carried within this. Okay, now a bit of Bourdieu. If you think that your German is not good enough in order to process Bourdieu in German, please activate Google Translate. I checked it out. It works pretty good on your mobile phone, because I'm not in a position of sort of like translating this to an extent I like. Now this is Bourdieu. He speaks of the market, of the linguistic market. Sorry, I sometimes need to sort of look at my my manuscript. This sort of states very good that not the message itself, which is rated, it's not the message itself which is rated or valued, but it's the language. The language itself becomes part of the message. And what's important here is this market organization of language, which Bourdieu talks about, and originates, in my eyes, in the formal public space, where the society at large constitutes itself. It certainly transfers to the other social spaces, but that's not where it originates. I find this very nicely exemplified, and this is a long citation from Bourdieu, which I'm not going to read to you, I'm just going to show you, where he speaks of an incident where the mayor of a certain, in a small town in the southwest of France, where a certain variety of the Gallo-Romance language Gascon is spoken in Béarn, the name of Béarnese. It's a non-codified regional minority language. It doesn't have any official state whatsoever. And the Mary, there is a kind of like celebration at the for a certain Béarnese poet, and he uses some words in Béarnese. And the newspaper thereupon writes, says like this Zuvorkommenheit. What is it in English? Huh? Has anybody used Google Translate to sort of check this? Huh? Like this kind of like Herablassung, Zuvorkommenheit. What is in English? Check your mobile phone. I mean, it's easy. Huh? Forthrightness. This forthrightness is kind of, it's the newspaper says this is what a nice gesture kind of thing. But really, and Bourdieu kind of like analyzes this thing. What it is, it kind of shows the disrespect for this language. Disrespect for this language, and it kind of reconstitutes the hierarchy between French and this language, because if you use it in this kind of occasion, you can only show that you're kind of like lowering yourself down to these people which speak this language, which you might not even consider to be a language. What is important here is also that not the language itself, but also who uses the language at this very moment. And in a similar way, I would say, this language which does not have any capital at all, in a similar way, the fact that Mary uses this language sort of transports it into another kind of capital. In a similar way, my knowledge of Turkish, for me, because I learned it as a second language, I can use it in my professional life, is very, very strong capital, social capital, economic capital, and definitely also cultural capital. But for somebody else, it might completely not be the case. Okay, I come to school. Hierarchies of language classes in the formal public space, the school. I think when we look at sort of like language lessons at school, we can kind of like use these as kind of factors in trying to find out about hierarchies. Okay, legal states on the state level, optionality versus obligatoriness of class participation. Like English, you have to choose. School level, where the language is taught, is it only primary level, also secondary, upper level. Relevance for general school success, is there a note given or not? Can you sort of use it for the Abitur? Pure language teaching versus inclusion also of content teaching is something. And then lessons taught outside, inside of general school hours. And then a very special thing, that's why I put it into italics, prerequisite of existence of personal relation to the language, which is like an interesting thing that all of a sudden there's also lessons which say you must be Turkish or Kurdish in order to sort of, or it must be your first language in order for you to sort of arrive here. This brings us to a certain hierarchy. German language classes, which until the 70s were mother tongue classes in Germany. Foreign language classes, Fremdsprachenunterricht, minority language classes, under different names like minority language, neighbor languages, regional languages. We have these names for these particular languages. And then we have heritage language classes, Herkunftssprachenunterricht, sometimes also Erstsprachenunterricht in Berlin, new term. In the federal state of Brandenburg, also muttersprachlicher unterrichtet is native language lesson or mother tongue education. Now, a couple of notes on the hierarchy. First of all, the degree to which the degree of the integration of heritage languages in the German school system varies from language to language and from federal state to federal state. Looking at the languages and the degree to which they are integrated into the system, a further factor seems to emerge, and this is the factor of alleged canonicity of the language and standardization of the language. These might go back to one attribute, and this is the question whether the language is an official language anywhere else in the world or whether it is a stateless language. Sheriff Deringe, in his various articles and his upcoming dissertation, convincingly argues that the fact that the establishment of Kurdish heritage language teaching in the school system requires such an incredible amount of bottom-up energy is linked to the fact that Kurdish is a stateless language, which in turn leads to numerous insinuations from the side of the school administrations concerning standard, canonicity, teaching material, political implications, and whatnot. By the way, there's also kind of struggle going on between Turkish and Kurdish. Turkish teachers saying, like, we don't really want Kurdish in our school. Well, because it's a concurrence. What's concurrence in English? It's competition. There's a competition going on between the heritage languages. Note on the heritage hierarchy too. This is the concept of multilingualism, very, very well meant, developed by the state of Brandenburg, and I quite like the whole concept. But in the introduction, they have this interesting, like, tripartite distinction. Ausbau der Mehrsprachigkeit, fostering of multilingualism in the federal state. Great thing. They have like these tripartite distinction, where the Stärkung und Förderung der regionalen Sprachenvielfalt, regional language varieties, are to be fostered, are to be expanded. And of course, with regional language variety, they don't mean Kurdish and Arabic and Russian and Ukrainian, which is talked, but it's like Sorbian, it's Polish, it's Low German, and yeah, that's about it. Okay. And then they have Weiterentwicklung der fremdsprachlichen Angebote, which is like English, the foreign language classes. And then they have Unterstützung der sprachlichen Integration, like fostering of linguistic integration. And below this, there is heritage language education. So, I mean, it has a completely different like orientation from the other language classes. By the way, I mean, say it again, I like the concept. I even think it's a more general concept like than the federal state of Berlin has developed. Bremen also has something like this. Saarbrücken has also like something like this. Brandenburg is quite interesting here, but Sie haben eine Cloud-Aufzeichnungsanfrage enthalten. Aufzeichnung starten. Starten? Okay. Right. So again, hierarchy. And then third note on the hierarchy is that these statuses are quite fuzzy. That is, in reality, it's not possible to draw a line. When you look at Russian as a foreign language versus heritage language, where Russian has a long tradition as a compulsory foreign language in the former GDR, and then with the reunification of the two Germans, Russian became a foreign language and quickly lost, it wasn't a very loved foreign language, quickly lost pupils. So there was no interest. So what did Russian as a foreign language then do? It opened up its doors for those that spoke Russian as a home language. And it completely kind of like reversed and overthought its didactics in order to open up for both those that learned Russian, wanted to learn Russian from scratch on, as well as those that already spoke Russian. And it was Anka Bergmann, and I was shocked to hear that she only passed away a couple of months ago. She was at the Humboldt-Universität, and she was very much, I mean, it's a good point to commemorate her. She advanced quite a lot of highly interesting ideas on how to sort of develop a didactic where these kind of different, highly heterogeneous sort of linguistic competences could sort of be dealt with in one language class. And we have a similar thing in Brandenburg with Sorbian, the minority language, which now is in like organizational-wise is a foreign language and explicitly in its curriculum addresses those that bring with them Sorbian as a home language, as well as those that learn it as a foreign language. Similar with Low German as a regional language in the federal state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. When you look at the curriculum, they say some might know it, some don't, and both are welcome in the classroom. And last but not least, notes on the hierarchy terminology matters. I have problems with the term Herkunftssprachenunterricht. A paper by Almut Küppers and me quite a few years ago, where we said, well, this is can only be understood as a language spoken where the speaker and his or her ancestor come from. And this is meant either geographical or ethnical or national, but nowhere refers to the place where the speakers of this language, to which reference is made, lives and is part of a society, namely German. And also we linguists need to have a good look at ourselves. The term heritage language we use has a similar connotation. We use it without any apparent linguistic reason, exclusively for non-dominant languages where the speakers, or rather the ancestors, have immigrated unless in recent, more or less recent years. We use it like an alternative for the term allochthonous languages, which we don't like because it has a connotation with strangeness or otherness. But is heritage much different? I'm not sure. Okay. Possible alternatives, way to go. First, there is this idea of language assessment, Sprachfeststellung for all pupils. All federal states have the option in their school system that a student who speaks a language other than German at home, which is not offered as a foreign language, will be able, can have this language certified according to the framework of reference, and thus be exempted from the second compulsory foreign language. In most cases only offered for newly immigrant pupils. And then in an article, 3 Sprachen sind genug fürs Abitur, Dieter Vogel argues for a broad extension of this, says like this should be sort of offered to anybody who speaks a language which is not in the form in the foreign language portfolio, and it could be organized in online learner groups across the regions and so on. Preparations. Interestingly, then, an open letter of the Department of Romance from the university. I mean, like Dieter Vogel, she was interviewed in radio about this idea, and then it appeared in the local newspaper of the town where she lives and where she works at the university. And then there was an open letter from the Romance department of this university saying, it is a discrimination for the students that speak another language at home if they are sent to do this certificate, because then they cannot learn the the European academic language, Bildungssprache, namely French or Spanish, which would sort of like be quite widen their worlds and so on and so on. So we see there's a power struggle going on at school. Okay, who gives which lesson and where should they go and so on. And this power struggle, of course, continues. Another thing is like upgrading heritage language class into foreign language class. Arguments are a lot. I don't need to go into the details. And I think one strong argument also, it disrupts the potential anticipation going with the heritage language class, which is only open for Turks or Arabs or Kurds, whatever. The strange status of it. However, I was invited some time ago to a conference celebrating 30 years of Kurdish heritage education, and I advocated for a future of Kurdish also on these lines, like opening up also like for those that wanted to learn Kurdish from scratch on. And I was met with criticism which we could sort of like paragraph like this, saying like, this is our language, we want our children to identify with their language. Having it in the format of a foreign language dismisses the identity issue, which we regard as crucial. So there's this identity issues, which I think we have to discuss. Like, who are these languages for? And who has, who learns them why? I switch topic. I need some more 10 minutes. Is that okay? Yeah? Okay, thank you. I switch topic. Possible alternatives, ways to go in the longer run. And this is the topic I'm not really sort of, let me say, I'm kind of still working on. Excursus, posthumanism. There's an ongoing discussion among philosophers, cultural scientists, which centers around the question whether we live in a post-humanist area, meaning an area where traditional humanist ideas centered on human exceptionalism, autonomy, and the like are increasingly being challenged by cultural, technological, ecological developments. One aspect of this is technological advantages in artificial intelligence, biotechnology, cybernetics blur the boundaries between humans and machine, between natural and artificial. What about language in the post-human area? I think language here is in the center of two dynamics. One is top-down, the other is bottom-up. And top-down means originates in the formal public space and in fixed languages and in discrete languages and in standard languages. The other is bottom-up, like it starts from where multilingual repertoires original from and how they look like. Top-down, AI and language it's easy possible, or will be possible in near future, to generate texts in any language based on my prompt, produce summaries and technical translation from any language into any language, translate audio input, ask my fridge whether there's any milk left, and ask him to answer me in Hindi, develop a personalized language learning program for me with exercises, moderate me in learning, and so on and so on. All this is possible to a certain extent now, and there's quite a lot of energy being put into developing this, and I spare you what Elon Musk says about this. And a respectable president of a respectable German university, in fact, University of Potsdam, says in 10 years we all have a button in our glasses or ears that translates simultaneously so that you can speak Chinese, I speak French, and we can understand each other. Then I won't need to learn any foreign languages, not even English. He follows a very similar statement repeatedly uttered by Wilfried Kretschmann, Prime Minister of the Federal State of Baden-Württemberg. Maybe add that both the President as well as the Prime Minister propose Medienkunde, media studies, sort of instead of the second foreign language. Okay, and if I understand right, the Federal State of Lower Saxony, Niedersachsen, has recently stepped away from the obligatory second foreign language in schools, and similarly, the Minister of Education of yet another federal state, in a private discussion with me, dismisses the whole idea of the fostering multilingualism in schools as a marginal topic with explicit reference to artificial intelligence. So, like, with this development, I mean, why bother about multilingualism in schools and all this? Now, of course, there's a lot to say regarding philosophical, cognitive, social linguistic implications of this devotion to what AI can do. Britta Schneider has a very, I think, very good article on this. There are 3 points I think are important. First, with the AI tools and their appraisal, we are back to an understanding which takes language as discrete systems. And we are back to a naive understanding of human communication, where we have a sender and a receiver and a message encrypted in language which goes to and fro. Very interesting, Elon Musk saying like that this chip, which in 10 years we will all get implanted, is able to translate much more detailed. You know, and detail is the crucial thing in communication for him. And the third thing, and I'm still not sure about this, is we have a complete dematerialization of communication. Now, I spare you this, how to grasp the multilingual individual's repertoires. There's quite a discussion, Grosjean with his complementarity principle, then Blommatz with truncated repertoires, Aronin, dominant language constellations, and lately Pennycook, plurality of codes, which in a way completely gives up upon discrete understanding of language, replaces it with the term code, and starts from the point that people constantly draw from different semiotic codes when they communicate, where codes are socially situated resources that speakers draw on, adapt, mix, transform, and interaction. I mean, like, we live this every day. You're in a Zoom conference is going on in a particular language, you read the translation, in the chat, you discuss with a colleague of you in yet another language, and then, I don't know, your 2-year-old daughter comes in and is hungry, and you have to care for her, in even another register and language, and so on. So we constantly switch places. Yes, loads of examples I could go on here. Now, what has this to do with posthumanism, this thing? With digitalization and increasingly with what the large language models offer us, my own linguistic repertoire is extended and enriched by, as long as I keep the control, and that's the important thing, by machines. My repertoire is more than what I write or speak. I can transform it into other spheres, so to speak. For example, simply by pressing a button and speaking or writing accent-free Hindi. And if you, I don't know, I mean, there was this thing on Deutschlandfunk this morning, Weimar, about our cultural minister of cultures, state secretary of cultures, Weimar, who has created an avatar of himself who speaks accent-free European languages, and you can't interact with him at the moment, but you will probably be able to do so in a couple of years' time. And I can't draw from resources which are completely external to my cognitive, bodily, and material linguistic experience. Think of a student studies in Taiwan, was promised that there would be English lectures at the university where he or she goes to. She finds out no English lectures, only Chinese. Do I know Chinese? No, but Google Translate does, and it works. Now, what please does this have to do with our topic? That's the crucial thing. On the one hand, we're called upon to at least reconsider the primacy of monolingualism in language teaching, the primacy of competence orientation in language teaching, and the primacy of interculturality as a bilateral concept, like between German and the respective language of the classroom. I think, because that's what the, yes, yeah, I'm through. Now, on the other hand, digitalization allows for greater individualization of language learning, and that's the important thing here. Maybe, and this is where I'm kind of starting to become really fuzzy, okay? Maybe this allows us to put aside the outdated differentiation between foreign language teaching and heritage language teaching and simply have language classes where pupils are given the opportunity to develop or further develop their interest in expanding their communicative and linguistic interests and potentials. With the teacher rather monitoring but not leading the direction of learning. And the argument that the teacher, well, I don't know the language, is not an argument anymore, because like AI can provide you with a language. So, I mean, I think we have to sort of think the whole idea of language teaching, or we can rethink the whole idea of language teaching with this development going on. Okay, thank you very much. Last but not least, DeepL used here and there for English proof and for preliminary versions of translations. ChatGPT Plus used in order to create preliminary versions for some summaries and some definitions. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much. Das geht nicht? Ja, geht's. I'd like to invite our panel to the floor. Ben, could you please? Mr. Özcan, can you please also? Yeah, thank you. Yes, we would like to ask for commentaries first from our panel, and maybe we can start online. So, and ask Fanny Meunier to please comment.
Yeah.
So. I think it's okay, so right?
No, but it's not there.
Ah, okay. No. Can you move it to the phone?
Ach so, rüber. Nee.
Sorry. Technical issues. Yes. Can you close this down and yes. No.
Okay, right now everybody can see you. but we don't hear you.
Okay, I think it's okay. So.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, please, can you say something to check if we can hear you
Can
now?
you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So, bonjour à tout le monde, and a bit of translanguaging. Merci beaucoup pour la présentation. So it was very interesting presentation, very dense, with all sorts of linguistic, philosophical, sociological comments. So what I'd like to say without taking too much of the floor is that what we're seeing today with all the issues that you addressed, different languages, hierarchization of languages, use of tools, is that it's something that all university alliances are working on. And I think the more we work on it collectively, the better. And I think we have good practices everywhere, and pooling all those good practices together will really be useful for the opening of languages and the recognition of languages and the look at languages in a different way than what is being done today. So I'll just leave the floor to others and I may intervene later, but thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much for your commentary, and maybe we can continue with our panel here. Maybe we can start with our student panelists. Marius, would you like to start?
Yes, of course. Thank you for the talk. Does it work now? Great. Thank you for the talk, first of all. It's a very interesting idea, but also very future-orientated to think about language teaching in school as like something unionized, where like all the languages come together with technical support. Yes, what I think with the problems are, that just like current with how we design teaching currently and right now. And when I talk to fellow students, like prospective teachers, I still feel that the role of language in the classroom is still an afterthought often. And that's not because of the universities not doing enough. I feel like they're doing a lot. I feel like that's also because the effects of a student's language biography is often very dispersed and hard to pinpoint. One example that I see a lot in schools is that students, often with a multilingual background, say very, very interesting stuff, have very interesting ideas, but struggle to translate them into language. And their contribution is just getting lost in the noise. And on the other hand, monolingual students, and I know that because I did it myself often, manage to sell okayish ideas as great ones by giving them a quite smooth linguistic surface, by using like fancy terminology or like forming complex sentences and stuff like that. And I think that is just one mechanic outside of just like foreign language courses that you can get good grades for, in which monolingual students have a structural advantage across a large spectrum of subjects in school. and also one mechanic that contributes to the reproduction of power dynamics, not only in the classroom, but in society as a whole. Yes.
Yeah, maybe I can continue. And yeah, I had some thoughts also about how it already starts very early, like in elementary school, that multilingualism gets is valued very differently depending on the language, and that it really needs more conscience, like in the early years. Yeah, and there needs to be more thought about language teaching and language practice as identity work, and not only as competency building. Yeah, and that's also what I thought about when you, Fanny, talked about, like, there are very many good ideas already, and like very engaged people who do like bottom-up work. Yeah, which is like very hard against the slow policy, education policy, like in Germany, which also showed in the commentary of like, oh, the European Bildungssprachen. I mean, it is important to acknowledge that, as you said, like a certain kind of language gives you access, but it's not automatically the traditional European languages that are worth learning and others are not. Yeah, but I'm also wondering how we can combine those individual approaches and maybe modern appropriate perspective with the like kind of outdated traditional school approach.
Yes, thank you. It was a very interesting and very inspiring talk, and a lot of things to discuss and comment upon. But I was mostly intrigued by your last reflections on a new type of foreign language teaching, where students can use online resources to learn whatever language they want. So I just wanted to ask, because you also had this distinction about just some of these ideas about what you can use online teaching for, takes us back to a more simplistic view of what language is. And so how do you see the future for online language learning? Will it be able to also teach students some of these cultural understandings that typically comes with foreign language learning, or will it mostly be kind of vocabulary training? How do you see that future?
Shall I answer? Or? As I said, this was the part where I was mostly like most unclear and fuzzy, because this is where I stand at the moment. Okay, but I think the reason why I called it top down versus bottom up is because I think there's an enormous potential in everyday linguistic and language and communication experience that every one of us makes, no matter whether we are monolingual or bilingual or plurilingual or what. And to start with the question, what do you want to do with language? How do you want to expand your knowledge about language and your knowledge about languages? What do you want to do? Do you want to be able to have a like read, I don't know, law texts in Turkish when you have Turkish as a home language? Is that how you want to expand it? Do you want to expand it by means of like, do you want to expand your Italian so that you can sort of discuss with somebody on this and this topic? What do you want to do? And I believe that, I mean, it's not going to work on primary level, of course, but I mean, you could think of a three-part thing. We have this concept of Begegnungssprache in primary schools, which says what languages do I see, which languages do I live with, what do I think about them? This is a kind of like concept which already exists. Let's have this for primary school, okay? And then we go to the lower secondary level, and we say, okay, we call it language exploration. So what is there in language? And then on the upper level, you call it language expansion, and you say, okay, what do I want to do with the languages I have or I'm curious about? What do I want to study? Where do I want to put my focus? And what linguistic competences must go with this? And I can concentrate on them. So the teachers then are people which moderate me in my decisions and which kind of I can reflect with them on what I want to do. Is it realistic? Is it not realistic? And so on. I mean, this is kind of utopian, but at least it would sort of allow us to come away from, like, is this a heritage language? Is this a regional language, minority language? Where do we put it in the system and so on? That was the idea.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's very inspiring, and I just want to add that I think teachers will have a major role also in inspiring the students in terms of how could you imagine using language, because there are probably many ways of using and studying language that's beyond the imagination of some of the students, so teachers will have an important role there. Okay, thank you.
Well, yes, and I think that the idea of having language awareness or knowledge about language or a kind of primary school sociolinguistics is a great idea, and there are quite a lot of models out there of how to do it. I have a question and a comment coming, I'm afraid, from England, which is a different kind of country, maybe. First of all, does the inclusion of regional languages, Niederdeutsch, in this discussion mean that conversations about Mehrsprachigkeit are actually refer to everyone, refer to the whole population? Because the situation in the UK is, not the UK, sorry, in England, is that a lot of advocates of multilingual education say, wow, 20% of the school population has another language at home. But what they don't say is what actually 80% don't. So that there's a risk that talking about multilingualism sounds like pressing a particular interest group. It's not a conversation that refers to everyone. And if it's going to refer to everyone, then it needs to expand to take in regional languages like Cockney and Scouse and so forth, which is not impossible, but it needs to broaden in that way. So that's just my question, a clarification question. We're talking here about the whole population, not just a minority when it comes to going beyond foreign languages. That's the first one. My second question, though, is about your imagining of the future, and maybe you touched on it when you talked about Kurdish coming inside schools, and also definitely when you talked about the example of Turkish in Cyprus. Aren't you assuming that we continue in conditions of liberal democracy? And that we're not all going to turn into the United States, and that actually, free choice will be allowed, and AI actually won't be a surveillance tool to pick out the shibboleths that lead in all sorts of rather disagreeable directions. So, maybe your long-term view is an optimistic one, and the technologies you're talking about and the space for languages that you're imagining will be a lot more oppressive, let's say.
Yeah, well, I'm being optimistic. Yes, I'm being optimistic because I think it's ample time that we sort of like develop some kind of standpoint in this discussion, and don't leave it to those that believe in like language-wise believe in AI and what it can do, because they're based on wrong assumptions about language. That's the big problem here. And we are the ones that need to tell them, and we are the ones that need to sort of like say, it's not going to work like this. Of course, it's a good idea, we can use it, but it's only part of communication, what you're offering us. There's no other way to go. That's the one thing. The other thing is this ideas of the federal state of Brandenburg, also Bremen, Saarbrücken, Bremen, Berlin, developing these concepts of multilingualism, of course, mean everybody, because they have this differentiation of this is this language, this is that language, this is a foreign language, this is a heritage language, and so on and so on. That's my criticism. But in general, I find this idea of developing such concepts and using the term multilingualism not only for those which are multilingual per upbringing or what, but simply for everybody, because we all sort of like we all deal with languages, we all deal with dialects, we all deal with varieties, increasingly so with this kind of like digital enhancement and digital sort of enlarging of our human space. So it's part of our everyday experience, multilingualism, not only for those that have like grown up with more than one language. That's the idea.
But presumably people white working class Germans who could be mobilized to say, oh gosh, what are all these foreigners doing here, getting all this space for extra language stuff. Can't say that, because you say, no, look, we're talking about your vernaculars too.
Exactly.
And that's potentially different from the situation in the UK.
Yeah. Probably, yeah.
So I could pick up this because the situation in Vienna is different. Those pupils who use another language than German at home are the majority, so we don't. But I wanted to pick up other ideas from your talk that I found really inspiring. Namely, ideas about power issues, and join it with experiences from my own work. For example, the debate on transgressing the boundaries between foreign language teaching and, in Austria it's not heritage language teaching, fortunately it's ESU, Erstsprachenunterricht. Since 2 years we say first language teaching. It's better than heritage language teaching, I would say. And there was the idea to bring Turkish up as a foreign language. It didn't work for the academic upper secondary schools, and one of the arguments was a power issue argument, but those who already know Turkish, they could have an advantage. So this is my first point. The second point is the idea you brought about assessment, assessing the competencies of people and then replacing the second foreign language. I'm very critical about this because I do not think that this can value the language that they use, they experience, but can even do the contrary. Languages that you use in daily life, languages that you are very comfortable with, would be assessed. How would they be assessed? Of course, with the Common European Framework of Reference, there is no fit between everyday experience and the levels of the Common European Reference. So I think it's a good idea if language teaching is provided too. So if you can come to development, academic development, development of other domains of use, and so on, and then assess it. But assessment alone, I would see this very critical. And then my first example is from a very recent experience in Austria, also a power issue. The second foreign language is the most powerless language in our school system because everybody thinks English is enough. So there was a big debate in the vocational business schools. They wanted to get rid of the second foreign language, but finally this debate turned out into a new curriculum that didn't replace it, but on the contrary, they invented a new subject that is called international communication with a focus language based on existing multilingualism, with a language taught, but not only the language, also languages from the same family. So you have French and Spanish, French and Italian, and so on. So they are widening the scope from this entity thinking. It has not yet started, but I think it's a good start. Yeah, I stop here.
Would you like
just for the second, I mean, like the second, I find it very, very interesting, and I'd like to learn more about it. About the first Sprachfeststellung, maybe Fatih, you can say something anyway, isn't it?
Yes, maybe I could add something. There are so many interesting ideas floating on the panel, also with your presentation. Just a few things I've just noted down, I found really interesting at what point we are currently. So you mentioned, for example, for a few things there is a large bottom-up energy needed. I just picked up that from your presentation. Plus the thing, the aspect that it is important to have heritage language instead of foreign language because the fear of loss of identity that is connected to language. Plus, if we add this to the AI level, I will come to the Sprachfeststellung afterwards. I found it really interesting because I just had this thought, well, if we move from all those classifications, foreign language, minority language, heritage language, Begegnungssprache, language exploration I really like that one, also language expansion. I really thought, when we think about this projection into the future, how could, like, I had this question in mind, how could like AI change our perspectives or perceptions on codes, just to mention codes as an aspect, and how AI can like support to learn and switch between these codes in terms of language learning. So we don't think of language like class, in class where we learn languages, but in terms of learn the codes, or we teach codes, and at the same time we promote, we foster, we support in terms of, for example, in terms of heritage language, we give impulses to learn and to develop heritage language, and then have the assessment. And it's really interesting because the aspect of assessment at this point, we've seen this quite many times now in Berlin. This Sprachfeststellung is a really big thing in Berlin. And we can see this, it's like within the language communities, there is a large talk, even between the students. If they really need that, they do that. They want to do that because they see their potential. They see the potential of their languages that they bring into the formal level. They can do their Abitur, they can like continue their educational level. I'm not just saying just, maybe the wrong word, but with all their language competences. I think this is really interesting idea also come up here in this round, and yeah, thank you very much. I just was more like a comment.
Yeah.
I'm getting urgent.
I'm so sorry. Can we maybe continue with Heike so that you could continue with your commentary afterwards, Elisabeth? Would it be okay? So you can add also your comment to this and continue with your commentary so that you can have more time for discussion at the end, actually, because we would like to open the discussion also for the public.
Okay. No problem. Okay. Maybe just very short. Just because my thoughts is also in your direction. It's on the naming of language. I think it's also very important what you said. The name labels such as heritage language or foreign language is not just merely descriptive. I think it's operate as an instrument of classification or status. And if we are thinking in the future, the question that I have in mind is how would the future definition of languages be in respect to artificial intelligence and the new forms of codes and so on. Just addition to what you said. Yeah, very short. That was very short.
Maybe you can read out Fanny's comment. I realized there was a comment. Yes.
So, in the chat. I think we are still using categories that no longer reflect reality. European languages is not the same as languages spoken in Europe. And terms like first, second, or foreign language feel increasingly outdated. In today's complex, mobile, multilingual world, we should focus less on ranking or labeling languages and more on recognizing them as additional resources that shape our lives and our knowledge building. Sorry, you could have just have said it yourself, but no, I read it.
Yeah, and I'm keeping my comments to myself for the time being because we have the round tables, and so we have time for the general discussion as well, or do we move that for after the commentary?
I would propose we move that for after the commentary, actually.
And give the floor to Elisabeth.
Give the floor to Elisabeth, yeah.
Yeah, really?
Yes.
All right.
You have slides?
No, I don't have slides. I will just comment.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay.
You can move the table a bit, so it's more how you feel more comfortable.
I think it's okay like this, so long as you can hear me well. Yeah? Okay, then that's good. I think the last comment in the chat goes in the direction of my comment. It's also very important that we rethink the definition of language and so on. I will comment along the lines of the politics of language naming from description to discrimination. Like we've heard from the last comment, we have to think further. What does that mean? Defining language heritage, foreign, or whatever label we want to give. So I will start with the point that language is never just a neutral medium. It is also very political, and that's why we have some categories. And it's also the question who define what is a heritage language, foreign language, or a normal language. That is also a question that we can think about it. So naming languages into foreign, minority, heritage shapes how they are being perceived, valued, and used in the society. It's just like we had the experience of the Turkish language and then Sorban language in Germany. It would depend how people know about this language and who uses this language and how that language is being perceived and used in the society. So an open question that I would like us to have is how does naming move from simple description to forms of discrimination? That's also a question we can take. I don't have all the answers to those questions, but we can take them as an assignment for all of us. So what appears to be mere description thus becomes an instrument of distinction and often of discrimination. A foreign language typically enjoys prestige and institutional support in schools. We've heard about French and other language, while a heritage language is framed as private or familiar and kept outside the educational mainstream. I think a minority language is too often treated as a deficit rather than a resource, because we should look at all the languages that we see them as resources. It's always a plus. It's an additional skill that someone is bringing, and that should be a resource and not as a deficit. Whoever decides how a language is named also decides what place it occupies in society and in institutions such as schools. A critical perspective on these labels is therefore necessary in order to reveal discriminatory effects and to open up new ways of engaging with multilingualism. The presentation that we just heard from Professor Schroeder demonstrates how linguistic practice shifts across private, informal, we just heard about the market setting, and formal spaces. And it is precisely in the institutional space of the school where the politics of language naming becomes more visible. We have to reflect on those ideas and see how we can recategorize what it means to have a foreign language, an heritage language, and so on. So, what is also important for me is that we should look into the future. We should look towards changing our perspectives in how we classify languages. And it's always very important to look at the challenges that we inherit through the categories that we have so far when we want to look at under minority, foreign, and heritage. So how do we define these languages in the future? And if we want to consider change, we should also recognize that linguistic repertoires as resources, they are resources and not deficits. I think I mentioned that also in the beginning. And we have to create inclusive policies that reflect actual multilingual practices. We have a lot of students, they can speak 3-4 different languages, and sometimes they are being rated on the main language that is being taught in the school, and they don't consider the other skills that they bring with them. So it's also good to reconsider those aspects. And we also know that when we talk about the politics of language and redefining language, how do we want to bring the change for the future? And how do we want to shift from this political aspect to the normal school or normal institutional setting that we can assume that people have skills and focus on the skills that they bring within that space? In conclusion, I would say language it's political, and we are still living maybe in past glories. We should start thinking of future redefinition of how we want to categorize language, especially with new tools, especially with artificial intelligence that we have everywhere on our phones. And then if we talk about the water, that you just press a button and water will tell you, and the cup will tell you what you have to do. We should also see that aspect when it comes to language definition. What looks like description, it's also an act of discrimination. I think it's also important. We describe different languages in different, or we put languages in different categories. It's also very important that we see that categories bring in class and categories brings in also a form of discrimination. So that aspect should be considered. To build, in conclusion, I think to build more multilingual schools, we must critically question these labels and recognize all languages as a resource. I think that's also what I would suggest and what I'll give back to the room. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I would like to open the discussion and give the floor to the public. Maybe we can start with the audiences here and then look for questions or commentaries from Zoom. So please.
Thank you. I'm Uri Chorish from University of St. Andrews in Scotland. I think one of the problems of this discussion is the very framing of it as a European discussion. And there's maybe an elephant in the room, which is the elephant of colonialism, right? Why is it that we in Europe, or there may be discussions, similar discussions in North America, but why is it that here in Europe are we entitled to legitimize certain languages or certain language varieties? And I'd like to echo what has been said before about, not only about foreign languages, so-called foreign languages, but also vernacular varieties of local languages, right? I mean, we've seen this in the United States with African American English. I think we're starting to see this in England with multicultural London English, that even Ben mentioned Scouse and Cockney, but there are new varieties as well. I think this very discussion, you know, on the one hand, we're all talking about decolonizing the academy and decolonizing language and linguistics, but still we're kind of stuck here. And I don't know, I have a bitter taste in my mouth as to and even the term legitimizing came up in one of the slides. So I know I'm kind of rambling on, but I would like us to address this issue of what right do we have in policing language. I know I'm putting it a bit harshly, but I think it's come up in between the lines. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I didn't want to use the word decolonizing languages.
I kept waiting for you to say
No, and that's why I was struggling between political. I think when you use the word political, you can put all those categories under political situation. But if we're talking about languages, we have to talk about colonialization and how we can decolonize languages. You took the word from me, but I was not so confident in using it. Sometimes I avoid not to use those words, but it has to do with all those things. And sometimes you can classify all those kind of different categories under politics if you don't really want to use the word decolonization. But thank you very much.
It's a buzzword. We need to use it with precision.
Microphone. Yeah, you're right. So, but I agree totally with you, and that's why I said who defines the language also set the tone on how it is being used in schools or in institutions, and it all has to do with power. I think in the panel someone used power, also power struggle, power shift, and if we look into all those categories, then we'll create a safe space for everyone. Yeah, thank you.
No.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, maybe directly connected to that, I was kind of shocked by the example you gave, Christoph, not you, you quoted something. Christoph, Mensch. about the Romanists kind of defending their resources by saying it won't give pupils access to the big European Bildungssprachen, academic languages. And I think this term Bildungssprachen in this context is very clearly colonial heritage related. It's the idea that some languages are academic and have lots to do with education and others don't. And I think this mindset that in this time and day you can still say something like that and use it as an argument, I found shocking.
May I shortly answer? There is. I can understand the situation. It was not the Romance department, to be more precise. I kind of said, but the chair of didactics of this department, and of course, Romance languages are on the retreat, and so they have clear problems with other languages after English, which are to get a more advanced status in the school, because then they will receive less and less students. There will be the teacher of French and Spain will be more marginalized, and so on. So you have a simple status power struggle in schools, which I find totally understandable, and so they bring out whatever argument they have. It was telling this open letter was online for 2 or 3 weeks, and then they took it offline again because they also understood that this was a bit much. So this is why I didn't sort of openly name the department and all this, because they also understood that this was a critical issue, and they couldn't. This argument sort of didn't bring them very far and wouldn't be met with much sympathy.
Yeah, thank you so much. Also on the point of colonialism, I had a question about who are we learning from when we are having these debates, because there's a lot of research going on, for example, in South Africa, and I know in many Southern African countries that has grappled for decades and decades with these complexities, and it kind of seems a little bit cut off from that, as if we have to come up with completely new stuff, rather than looking at multilingual situations in the global south and how local researchers have been, making sense of them. So maybe that's just an idea. And then just a comment. You were mentioning Kurdish and the problem of a stateless language, so to speak. It's very interesting. I have a colleague working in Brazil who says they had there was a local Portuguese, and that was supposed to be promoted to school teaching status, and the community actually was very much against it, saying this thing that you're teaching there, that is based on these grammars and word lists, and that's not what we do. That's a different thing, So I think that's also really interesting, especially with regard to the AI, where language becomes purely representational. And then people who say, well, our language doesn't have anything to do with the stuff that you write down. So that might be also an interesting thing to kind of what is language, and for whom in that sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Really, really very interesting. And I think you're right about the debates in places like South Africa and in the UK, in England, we're using quite a bit of work on linguistic citizenship, which is a concept from Cape Town. But I do wonder whether we are not Christoph. I'm not saying, but some of our discussion is kind of university-style discussion. It's very important that we have utopian visions of possibility. That's really, really important. But we can't dissolve the world outside the university, and we have to talk in ways that do engage with things as they are. And I think that's you know, we sometimes say, oh, the reality outside there, how can people do things that are so out of tune with the reality? Well, the lenses that people are used in and socialized into in other places are different. They're looking at reality differently. And I think we need to make sure that our conversations are formulated, or at least we need to think about how we translate the ideas we have in a kind of university space like this into terms that are understandable, make sense, connect, and argue against dominant discourses that are, well, not necessarily dominant, but completely opposite discourses, because, you know, this is a major site of struggle, and it's not enough just to proclaim our values without bringing them into dialogue with very different values, which is why I raise the securitization issue, because I think that is something we need to think about. I mean, I think the discussion of AI was wonderful and really very interesting indeed, but I also think that there are alternative futures that could happen pretty quickly, which we also need to think about.
Thank you. I think we have a comment in Zoom. Can you please read it, Annika?
Okay, so comment from Zoom. I think we are still using categories that no longer sorry. And the person doesn't want to, so Dobrochana Futuro doesn't want to say it because
I think she lost, or he lost his voice.
So I will read it out. It is so important we have these conversations, and I'm thrilled to be able to join you all online. Speaking, writing from Scotland. Question about terminology in Scotland goes back to the one about what do we call a language. Scots is seen by many of its users as a dialect or a way of using English in Scotland. Also challenging the big gap between languages spoken at home and taught at school is what Scottish 1+2 policy is trying to tackle by L3 entitlement. Schools are invited to teach any language as part of this space, ideally in negotiation with local communities. Practice depends on various factors, but the policy, the opening is there. Also, children in schools are telling us that they already learn other languages than European using Duolingo and other apps. So again, it is very much about schools opening up for it. Assessment question. Sorry for a long comment and so on. Thank you. And anyone who wants to comment, ask questions on Zoom, please raise your hand.
My name is Edda Battigelli, and I'm not in the academic field, but I'm here for the AG SB, Staatliche Europaschule Berlin. I don't know if you know the model. And I wanted to bring in a reflection which is not anymore so political, but I think it's my perspective on multilingualism is that language I have to say also that I work in a Willkommensklasse, which is also an experience which helps me a lot to reflect. Has two aspects, and one is that we use language and we teach language for teaching thinking. So the aim is that the children has to learn the language to be able to think. But we have not to forget that they have to learn thinking. So if we always stay on the very low level, they cannot think. So I need to use also their home language to improve their thinking. So if not, they're going to sleep, fell asleep, basically. And another aspect I find is very important is that multilingualism gives us back the taste, the Geschmack, the fun of speaking. Yeah, when I'm I'm angry in the class, I say "Mamma mia," and they laugh. So we all laugh together. So it is and these both aspects, I don't think we receive through the artificial intelligence. So it is very important to use the digital tools to what they can give us. I use all the time for translating because I don't want to explain what does it mean Wortschatz in Bulgarian because it's too difficult. So I just take my phone and I look for the translation. But these two aspects, they are not given. Artificial intelligence can only give us a high level of languages. But that's not the main thing. It's not very important. And and then I think it's also important to think about multilingualism differently, depends on the level, because on the academic level, of course, we have to go much deeper and so on. But there is a long way before we get to the academic level. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you very much.
I would like to bring the point that Ben Renton made about how long will we still be a liberal democracy, with a question to Elizabeth. When I worked with German Namibians, they said, the young people said, we find it very annoying that we learn French at school. Nobody needs French here. Why don't we learn Ochiherero? That would be much better for our society. And that made me think a lot. And why should we learn French in Germany? Wouldn't it be much better for our social cohesion and for the for the kind of atmosphere we have in our society to learn Turkish instead of French? Always.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. Like, if you look at Berlin, for example, we have over 300,000 Turks in Berlin, according to the statistics. And I think it will also be a question: why don't we learn Turkish in Berlin schools, for example? But it's not the case. We learn French, or students learn French or English and other languages, despite the population of Turkish people in Berlin. So it has to do maybe also with colonial, I don't know. Like what you said, Namibia, they learn something else. If you come to Cameroon, it's French. French doesn't have anything to do with the normal running of the society, maybe the normal Creole or other languages that the people speak there. It's a really difficult thing when we want to talk about language and the politics of naming language, or who decides who uses what language in what school. Those are things that we should think for the future and reflect on them, and then look at the statistics or the population of the people who live in that area and which language should be used in school. I know it's a very difficult thing, and it's something that we cannot just translate within a very short time, and it's an assignment for everyone to take along with. Yeah.
Thank you. I think Fanny has something to say. Would you like to say it out loud, or should we read it?
I don't want to disturb the discussion, but I just wanted to write something in the discussion on the importance of being at the same time, opening up and being pragmatic, because this is something that we need to think about as well. And I just wanted to comment on something that is taking place in Belgium. It started in 2020. We have awakening to language sessions, which are being made compulsory as of the first year of kindergarten. And it's really great, because it doesn't mean that people are learning languages, but they're, from a very young age on, they're becoming aware of people speak differently, they write differently, they eat different things, they celebrate different, whatever events in their life, and it's all okay. And so I think, from what I can see after 5 years, is that it really makes a difference. And kids feel more involved, parents feel more involved in schools as well. And it's great because they feel recognized. And it's not only foreign, you know, I don't like those terms, but foreign, additional, whatever language, is that all the languages, and also dialects, and also, you know. So I think this opening should start very, very early on, and we will avoid, I hope, many problems if we start very early. I'll stop talking, sorry, but I just wanted to write it down.
Okay, thank you everyone for all the interesting presentations and discussions. I just, and I particularly liked this focus on the fact that any languages are not a deficit but a resource. And I also just wanted to highlight that the linguistic reality for a lot of these children that we're talking about is that they spend a lot of time also translating for their parents, for the community. And this has also long been seen as a deficit, but it's also a huge resource. And they learn these competencies and skills, and also, like we talk a lot about the private home language, but a lot of these young kids are exposed to highly institutional languages and systems that most kids of their age don't know about, and they learn a lot from this. And there's been quite a lot of research on it, and suggestions on how these translational competences can be added to the curriculum. So I think that's also a linguistic reality that can be taken into account when talking about multilingualism. It's not just separate languages, it's also the translanguaging skills and the translation skills that they develop.
Thank you very much. Hannah, can you give the... Oh, sorry.
Well,
yeah, here you go, please. Sorry.
Just, yes, I mean, I think that adds to the case for the kinds of discussion that Fanny was talking about, which is starting at kindergarten, but it can carry on throughout. And actually, you don't need to go to university to be able to discuss the problems of classification. People can discuss on the ground in classrooms, and that kind of locally produced language ideology, etc., enormous scope for it. And I think it's also good because it does kind of represent a case of the bridge between university university talk and classroom practice being kind of minimized, brings them together. I do actually have another question, but maybe I could ask it later.
I would like to make a short addition to Fanny's comment. I think it's really important to get children used to language diversity pretty early on. And there's one reason for this. So when you go into schools and actually ask teachers for justification or for their justifications to ban certain languages in the classroom, you usually get 1 out of 3 answers. The first is a pedagogical reason. They aim to improve their students' German skills by making German obligatory, which does not work. B, they have ideological reasons, so in a German school we should talk German. That, of course, will not happen. You only push it out of sight. And the third reason you hear, and that is the one I wanted to point out, is a social reason. The assumptions that students speak negatively about other students, with the affected parties not being able to understand what was said. So the interesting thing about that is, first, every act of communication in another language is, by this logic, like suspicious in a way. And the second thing is, I fear that a lot of those teachers are just scared that students talk bad about them personally, and that they therefore feel the need to control the students' language output. And when I hear that, I always ask why. because they are kids and they will always talk about other students, they will always talk about teachers. Doesn't really matter if they do it in English or German or Kurdish or whatever language, and they will do it anyways. When you're not in the room, they will do it when you're not there. And we explicitly asked students when we went into Berlin schools last year how they perceive their peers speaking, or how they feel about their peers speaking in languages they don't understand. And what we found is that it seems to be the case that a positive climate regarding language diversity in classrooms correlates with the students' acceptance of their peers speaking in another language. So the conclusion is quite an intuitive one. When language diversity is perceived as something normal, then speaking in another language is no longer perceived as something exclusive or exclusionary. And I feel like we should start with implementing that perception very early on in the educational system.
I just wanted to add like a quick thought on language diversity, because so far we've talked about different languages, but also if you think about like German, English, French, Spanish in the German school system, it's always like the European standard version for like the Bildungssprachniveau, but like that's such an Eurocentric vision, and it would also be needed to look at those languages as diverse languages that are not only spoken in France, in Spain. Yeah, and then also I thought that we sometimes touched upon like motivation, and that's like such a big point in language learning, and I think it's very, there were some good thoughts already on like we need to appreciate different motivations to learn. Because if you only learn a language for school, it won't stick. Anyways.
Okay, there are so many, so important things said. I wanted to link up. I cannot link up with everything, but I wanted to say something. I have the impression that we are stuck a little bit in mingling up multilingualism for thinking, for subject learning and so on, and language teaching, language learning. I know that using language is also learning language, so this is very much interconnected, but at school we have language learning, and we talked a lot about language learning, and then there was this comment on language for thinking. And I think what you said is also in this direction, and what Fanny said is also in this direction. So living together at school or socializing at school in a diverse way, putting language awareness at the center is something that we can, I'm sure we can all agree on. I would like to add something, because in this diversity, we call it in a paper, we call it epistemic multilingualism, saying that this kind of multilingualism is good for learning, and it should not only be transitional. Let's say language as a resource. Let's use Farsi as a resource for understanding better in German. No. I'm completely convinced of the concept of dynamic multilingualism. German can also be a resource for Farsi. And both is used for understanding better, for having a high epistemic quality of learning and teaching. So this is the idea for this diversity issue in subject learning. For the language teaching, I would like to add a little bit of criticism. I think we are stuck in the same categories if we say, I do not say this as a former French teacher only, if we say we should replace colonial French by Turkish because Turkish is the language of our surroundings and so on. I think this is also categorizing, but in a different way on the basis of numbers. If we want to really modify language teaching. I think what you said, exploration, expansion is a good idea to start. And maybe it's a good idea to start with the subject and the subject's repertoire. Let's take the repertoire as a starting point and then develop ways in order to fulfill the wishes of what the subject wants to develop and how she wants to develop it. So, stop. Too long.
I think we have a commentary on that from a student, I think in Zoom. Maybe we can read that first.
But this is from Fanny, no?
No, the very end.
Ah,
yes.
yeah, it is, yeah. So just a comment from a student outside of Europe. I'm a student in Denmark, just moved to Aarhus last month. To be honest, I am squeezed by Danish and English. Most of the time I feel like being an illiterate in Denmark. Danish is something I have no knowledge of, and English, which I have no difficulty with, but not to the level where it could build my mindset structure and extend my professional strength. I used to think language just as a tool to communicate, but actually it has profound influence on everyone. I started to reflect on what is language and how the Chinese language define my worldview and behavior, and which part is Chinese and which part is me. Thank you for the comment.
Thank you. Maybe one or two quick comments because the time is actually out, but we can continue our discussions in the afternoon.
Just a short comment from me, and I think it goes along with what with the message on the chart. It's like when we talk about language, language for thinking, language for communication, for everyone to understand why we are talking or why we are here together, and also language used in the different social spaces. I think we should reflect on that, and I'm sure Professor Schroeder gave us an overview of the different types of social spaces that we have, and also on the aspect that what works for the institution and what works in the school. I think that aspect is also important. Even when we have to create new forms, we should also rely on what works and what has been a very good example so far.
Just a question, a pedagogic question. Mehmet came up with the very interesting idea that AI can take care of the code side of things. And you know, the learning and vocabulary, the grammar and vocabulary is the inestimably tedious part of language learning, and seeing how that connects to thinking, goodness, I'm not sure. Well, I mean, I suppose it does, but it's really boring and puts people off. Is it possible to imagine pedagogies where AI takes care of the grammar and vocabulary, but you know, the thinking takes on in a more anthropological mode, where you know, culture, embodied semiotics, drama, intercultural understanding is done without necessarily the grammar and vocabulary of the language in a so-called languages classroom. I mean, are there pedagogies that do that? Or actually, when we're talking about learning a language, we do mean doing the grammar and doing the grammar. Pedagogic question.
I don't know, but I think that's exactly the thing we have to think about, or the school will need to think about, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to explain to the student, to the pupil, why he or she should learn this list when this list is on the internet, and when this list is like available for you and any of the electronic devices you have around you. So I mean, this is one of the major challenges which we have in front of us, or at least which the school, I mean, not me luckily, but the school has in front of it, because like you need to explain to them why they should learn the language if everything is in AI and readily waiting for them to be used. You know? So where to go? I don't know, actually.
Thank you very much for the inputs and commentaries and the fruitful discussion. Our time is up for the first session. I would like to thank all the participants online. The second part will be on site only, as previously announced. So thank you for joining us and engaging in discussions, making commentaries. Thank you all, and see you in other occasions, I hope.